welcome you to the podcast. I want to thank you for coming here this morning.
Thank you so much.
I mean, I really appreciate it. And I noticed that you've been looking at many of our podcasts, which makes me very happy.
Yes.
I've had some of your friends on.
Yes.
Yes. Ivo, let me start off with where were you born?
I was born in Bulgaria. Bulgaria is South Europe, close to, inside of Balkan Peninsula, close to Greece. And how to say, I was raised there, I graduated university, then I left.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a sister. She has studied before in Toronto University, University of Toronto is the proper way, and she's now professor in Sofia University in Bulgaria.
Is she older or younger than you?
She's younger.
How many years difference?
6.
So you're not really close at all, or were you close?
We are physically separated for many years because she needed to take care of my parents.
But also, her being 6 years different, you were already out of elementary school when she came in almost.
That's not exactly the case.
But were you close? Did you grow up close?
Yeah, because we play all the time together, and I was helping with her homework sometime.
Is that right?
And then also we went together to study in China.
Okay, so what about mom and dad? How are they doing?
They're quite old now.
Okay.
My father passed away about 8 years ago. He was 94.
Wow, he made it a good life. He had a good life.
Yes.
That's excellent. Your mother?
My mother is 85, and she's okay, but quite old now.
Okay, so it was just they stayed together the whole time?
Yes.
They did?
Yes.
My goodness, what kind of work did your father do?
Oh, my father was a professor at University of Fine Arts.
Okay.
He's a sculptor.
And your mother?
Mother is a professor in linguistics.
So that explains...
Emeritus professor, actually.
That explains the two children being high-powered in their fields. You in advanced technology
and my sister goes in linguistics and philosophy.
So did they really push that when you were... Okay,
no.
When you were a little kid...
That's not true.
Okay, let me ask you this. In elementary school, first of all, what kind of child were you? Were you more academic or were you more physical?
No, because of our parents, we are more academic.
Okay, so how did it start? What did they do? They read to you often and they had you...
No, let me explain. Maybe that's not common, but because they know that it's difficult, because I started primary school earlier than other peers by 1 year. Everybody was starting at 7, I started at 6.
Okay.
So they immediately, arranged private tutors for me.
And you were speaking the language. Your first language was
Bulgarian, but
right.
I was sent to the foreign language school. At that time, English was not available, was Russian. So in the first year, I cannot understand any language in the school, but I managed. So I was sent in a Russian school in Bulgaria,
okay, but
which is not a native language.
But your parents only spoke to you in Bulgarian?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course.
But they could speak Russian too?
Because of, possibility to learn before that.
Okay.
And also my father was born in Ukraine.
Okay.
But he returned back to Bulgaria before the war, Second War.
Right. But your mother's Bulgarian?
Yes, both of them are Bulgarian.
Okay. But you said he went to Ukraine.
He was born there.
He was born in Ukraine.
Because his parents was agricultural migrants at that time. But during the Holodomor in Stalin period, when many Ukrainians died, they managed to survive, but they returned after that back to Bulgaria. And then, of course, my mother and father experienced the war, but after that, they get married, and obviously, everything was fine. So, at home, me and my sister always have the kind of pressure to do better scores academically, and so on. And also, when we become old, more mature, we have always discussions in the dinner time about various topics of literature, art, science, politics.
But you're going to tell me there was something that was not traditional about the way you were raised as a little kid.
Yes, because I came from school, I cannot play with other kids. I just need to have tutors to study language, mathematics, whatever. I always was busy.
So your parents made sure you had tutors?
In order to make sure that I get achievement in the first years when I go to the foreign school or difficulties in certain fields. Okay. So they always ensure that. Of course, I have also attended private lessons on piano and so on, but I was busy as a kid, as like a 16 years kid. I was already busy at 6 years old.
Did you ever feel pressure because of that?
Of course, and I naturally later lost some of my skills because I was also painting, but the pressure, I think, somehow diverted that to more to science. I mean,
so how old were you when you started painting and stopped?
Obviously, I was very young, maybe 4 years old. I win actually international competition on arts.
But you didn't go to school till you were 6.
Yes, so that was before that. I mean.
Okay.
And my painting actually was awarded as a gold medal in that 69 competition.
When you were 4 years old?
The painting was 4 years old, but the competition when I was 6 years old, and was given me at that time. So old painting was presented later on. It was very interesting. But anyway, that is the past. I mean, I have diverted from that field a lot. I mean,
what you mean, the art field?
Yeah.
Okay. So
my father was not happy about that.
So he diverted you real quick.
No, I mean, he wanted me to become a successor of his business,
which
means art.
Okay.
I mean,
so
fine art.
Oh, you mean he was happy that he wasn't happy that you diverted from art?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that's what he was
So from the other, my father line, many of there's other siblings and relatives which we don't know very closely because, as you know, relatives are not very happy to coexist together in some members in Bulgaria. Okay. So we are not so close. But what I mean is that they're in the field of engineering and mathematics. So you see, you have several, DNA-driven directions. I mean, art and social science, and then natural science and engineering.
Okay. So when did you divert from art? How old do you think you were when you diverted from art?
Maybe 8, 9 years old.
8, 9 years old.
Yeah.
So what did you divert to? Science?
Yes, because I already have asked friends of my parents to arrange to have a small homemade chemical lab at home. So I was happy to do some simple experiments on that, changing the colors of the chemicals.
Right. So that really fascinated you, and
yes.
you started to enjoy that.
Yes.
So then throughout school, you focused mostly on science?
Yes, because I found it very kind of exciting, rewarding, and my parents said, chemistry is dangerous. You're dealing with chemicals, better to go to physics. So that's how they actually further divert me from chemistry to physics.
My goodness. So that your parents did that?
Yes, because they said, because I can win some competition, Olympiads in chemistry and physics, and most of the time the competition is similar day, so I need to choose one of those.
So you went into
yes.
physics?
Yes.
My God, do you have any teachers that you remember that really inspired you?
Yes, I have actually private tutors even in physics, and because at that time it was difficult, you need to open many kind of problem books and try to solve them. Mm-hmm. And it's not trivial because the homework for physics lessons is much simpler than for the actual one. You need to go to national competitions.
Okay.
So that's why I enjoyed really understanding from the teachers at private occasions.
Your private teachers were very good?
Yes, because
how did they make it exciting for you? How did they inspire you?
That's a very good question. Nobody asked me before.
Yeah, but because they had to.
Obviously, by solving many problems, you get inspired. Because if you cannot solve one problem, you kind of lose motivation. But if you try many and you solve most of them, you get the rewards.
Well, how did they act? How did they when you just solved it? Because this is Japan. You solve a problem, they go, Tsugi.
Yeah, go to next.
So, but
that's what they did. They said, go to next.
Your professor, your private tutors did that to you?
Yeah.
And that was inspiring to you?
I like to see which more challenge I could solve before I hit a roadblock.
Okay.
Yes.
And then what would they do to inspire you, to keep you going?
Maybe they will give me another case of electromagnetics or physics, something that is not in the standard textbook, so you need to think more about it or something like that. Yeah. That's how they did. But anyway, so from 6 years old, I have maybe tutors until I was how much? 14 years old. After that, I could manage myself. But, this kind of effort and support from my parents, I truly appreciate, because I later realized how difficult it is to do that in other countries. It's quite expensive in Japan and US.
That's right, that's right. Well, I'm I'm curious about this. Were your tutors mostly men or were they women?
They're both. They're both.
They're both. You had both?
Yeah, of course.
That's
maybe the foreign language tutors were female. The mathematics was always male. But I have one physics tutor that was also female.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Because I think it's inspiring to people to know, especially nowadays, where gender equality is so important, that women really did play a part in some of the harder subjects. We consider them to be hard, like physics. You don't hear of many.
That is true,
you know what I mean?
But to be honest, that's what I want to mention, that the quality of the teacher at school influences your scores. If the teacher is very kind of harsh of saying, hey, that's wrong, you're not solving properly the equation, you lose the motivation and you cannot make a progress. But when you have a good, inspiring teacher, especially I always have that in physics and chemistry, that's how I kind of get attracted to those fields.
That's what I was asking you. See, the thing I was asking you, Ivo, is this. Being a teacher myself, if the teacher is a child, when you're being taught, you're always looking at the teacher to see how they respond. If my face is cold and you've done the next one, you understand what I'm saying? They should light up and go, wow!
Not every teacher can do that.
I understand that, but there has to be something to make you, because that's what your parents do when they show you they care.
Most of the teacher in that conservative time, in a sense of that was good time, that teacher was strict and kind of proper. Some of them are very strict, and that of course scares the students. But I was scared from biology, for example, because of the teacher. Teacher was too strict. I have two teachers in a junior high school and high school. They are very strict in the sense you don't answer this, because you need to answer, I don't know the system in the United States, but you need to answer in front of other students.
Yes, sometimes they do that.
And if you cannot, it's a humiliation.
But also, did they have corporal punishment when you were young?
That was in the primary school. Okay. You need to go out from class or you need to stay in the corner. That is not correct today, but at the time that was common.
When I was in school, they could actually paddle you.
No, I understand that. Yeah. And that's why my grandfather actually need to defend me with from some of the teachers.
Because the teachers were very physical?
No, because they asked me to stay outside and I want to listen in the class inside.
So sometimes your grandfather would have to come in,
yes,
and say, "No, my grandson's going to stay inside."
No, he never did that. But I mean, he always discussed with teachers what my grandson did wrong and what he could do better.
And then they would
where's the problem, and so on. But also sometimes it's not the teachers; it's also with the peers. So it's a kind of. I'm saying is today parents do not support so much teachers with the schools because that's considered, that how it's called in Japan. That's called monster parents.
I understand.
If the parents complain too much to the school principal, teachers, the school is afraid of this kind of parents.
But anyway, so he didn't.
But at that time, that was normal. You need to defend your student.
You had to show interest in your child. If you did, the teachers would show more interest.
And also, these meetings between the teachers and parents was always on regular basis, and it could be formal one and also informal.
I see.
But what I like my parents is that if they found that they cannot fix the problem, they move me to another school.
How many times did you have to move schools?
I mean, some of the time I need to go to another school after entering exam, and means get to the better school, which was the national school in mathematics and physics.
Yes.
But other cases, I mean, totally I have 4 schools. I mean, from first grade to the 11th grade.
But of course, there's a natural change anyway, from elementary to middle school to high school.
Yes, but you can go from one school to another physically.
So what time did that happen? When you were in elementary or in middle school?
They said enough with the Russian school. Let's move to the normal school.
When was that? In elementary?
No, that was during the last year of the primary school.
Okay.
Then I go to the junior high school in one place, but they moved me to another one.
Okay, so it was in junior high
school. And then I go to the national high school. college.
And stayed there.
Yeah.
I see. Yeah. So it was in junior high school that you had to change?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
My goodness.
But so can you imagine changing one school to another? The peer pressure and all these things, fights with the boys.
Everything, yes. Finding out where you sat. And you had to do, but see, there's one disadvantage you had too. You had a disadvantage I had. My father actually put me in school one year early.
Yeah, the same as me.
There's a great disadvantage when you're young.
Correct. You're not mature.
1 year makes a big difference.
Yes.
You're not physically nor mentally as strong as the child above you in the same grade. And it affects you your whole life.
Correct. But there was one advantage. And that advantage is that when I graduated school at 17, I could go to university. And by going to university, I could defer my national military conscription, which was mandatory at that time. Now it's abolished. But at that time, every man need to spend 2 years in military training, which was considered stress.
But you had to be 18, right?
No, that's why I was not.
Right.
And I was able to graduate university when I was young. I was very glad on that.
You're very lucky on that. Mine was different. As soon as I got in, it was Vietnam. I didn't have a choice. My first year in college, they drafted me.
Wow.
So I had to enlist.
Yeah, but you're lucky. At that time, you cannot enlist for medical reasons.
No,
I tried.
I tried. No. They wanted me, if I didn't enlist, I would have gone straight to Vietnam because I would have been in the Army. So I enlisted into the Air Force, which is hard for you to go to Vietnam unless you're a pilot. That's why I did it.
Very good point. Very good point.
That's why I did it. Another way to get out of Vietnam possibly is to join another branch, was the Coast Guard. But some of the Coast Guard people didn't realize went to Vietnam.
Oh, I see.
So that wouldn't be sure, but the Air Force was pretty sure unless you became a pilot.
I've been only one time in the U.S. Coast Guard ship, which was a DARPA conference in Florida, in the most south place, which was I forgot the name. I was only Canadian, and they allowed me to be on that ship, and that was explained at that time by the Coast Guard people.
My goodness. Let me ask you this. So when you finished college, you finished with what type of degree?
College, you mean high school or university?
University.
Yeah, that was a master degree.
In what?
In physics.
In physics?
Applied physics.
My goodness.
And then I left the country. So I went to study.
You left Bulgaria?
Yeah.
And you went where?
I went to China.
But how many languages did you have by that time?
I mean, only 3. I mean, Bulgarian, Russian, and English.
Oh, okay. So you had the English, okay.
Yeah.
And you went to China?
No, because, let me explain. Let me explain. At that time, Bulgaria was the Eastern Bloc, and you cannot go to the West.
Right.
So
what year are we talking when you graduated?
86.
86.
I went to military prescription for 2 years.
When did it change?
89.
So
it went one year later.
Later, that's
yes,
what I thought,
yes, yes.
That's when the Berlin Wall, all that.
Yes, correct. So I was, anyway, and after China I went to University of Toronto.
Where'd you go to China? Where in China?
No, because I was in Canton, in Guangzhou.
Guangzhou. I used to, not too far from Hong Kong, the first stop.
Sun Yat-sen University.
I was in Guangzhou, that's where I sold medical equipment.
Yeah.
Guangzou. Dirt roads,
of
everything.
It
was just, my goodness.
Even finding the bread at that time was difficult. You need to go to the kind of famous foreign hotel to buy it.
Yes.
Was not available.
Yes, that's for sure. And if you went to the hotels, because most of the things are set up like compounds.
Yes.
You get inside. I saw more Mercedes-Benz inside there.
Friendship store, Friendship hotel, all these places where when the foreigners can buy some foreign food.
That's right.
Anyway, after that I went to the University of Toronto.
So you stayed there for a year. How was your year in China? You didn't speak Chinese.
No, I need to spend maybe 1.5 to 2 years before I can survive there, because at that time if you speak English, nobody can understand.
So how could you do anything? What did you do?
I mean, of course, I was with my sister.
Why were you with you?
Because she went to study in Peking University. I went to study in Sun Yat-sen University in Guangzhou. She was in Peking, but you see my point that we studied for 1 year together. The first year, when you need to have some basic Chinese, was very hard, because starting from zero, and also Tiananmen Square happened at that time.
That's right.
So we need to be moved to the embassies. All foreign students need to move from the embassy, and we need to stay there for several weeks, I would say, because you cannot depart the country easily at that time. You need to buy a ticket, and ticket was not easily available. We actually want to depart by Trans-Siberian train, and I saw Chinese Chinese nationals being arrested at the border when you leave China to Mongolia. At that time, that was July 1989.
So what did you do
when I saw that?
Yes.
Just I know what the Chinese authorities can do to anyone.
Right. But they didn't bother you, of course.
No, I have a lot of boxes of books because I was thinking I'm not coming back to China at that state. I don't know what was the
Your sister was with you too?
Yes, because we need to, all foreign students need to not stay in the universities, they need to stay in the embassies.
I understand.
Until things calm down. I mean,
it was interesting times.
Yes.
You were living history.
Yes.
Living history.
Yes. And we saw.
Did you? I mean, were you really fearful at this time? Did it scare you a lot? Did you think?
A little bit. When I see, at least I saw only one dead body taken by Chinese people from somewhere, and they move it in this kind of carry, this manual rickshaw type stuff.
Did you ever
carried
hear
in
any
the compound of the foreign language university?
Did you ever see anybody being hurt?
Not except that accident, and of course everything else was. Even I think Chinese students tried to post some photos of the damaged bikes and bodies, but was very low resolution, difficult to see at that time. Technology was not great. So photo taken and photo printed, that was the only way at that time. 89. So anyway, we are not scared because we know that we are foreigners, and also please understand that my mother was a foreign professor in China in 65.
I didn't know that. You're telling me now.
and I'm saying is that she saw the dangers of the Red Army, which is called in Chinese Hunwei Pins, at that time, and the Chinese side told her, you need to leave the country, it's not safe for you anymore in 66.
In 66?
Yes.
Why was why did your mother go to China?
Okay, so that is even more interesting. He was a student in linguistics.
She was?
Sorry, he was.
She was?
Yeah, she was. Okay. I'm sorry. Tired this morning.
No problem, no problem.
And then there was a professor from China coming in that late 50s to Sofia University to show what Chinese language is. Nobody in Europe knew at that time anything about China physically, really. And then many of the language students, graduate students, they attended the lessons and they said, that's very difficult, there's no way. But somehow my mother said, that's very interesting, let me continue. So her graduation thesis was the comparative grammar differences between Bulgarian and Chinese language, which was kind of extraordinary in those early 60s when she graduated. And that's how she kind of engaged with the China without knowing anything about China or anything of the future of China that will happen in the next 60 years. So when there was a need from the Chinese side to have a professor teaching Bulgarian language in China, she applied and she approved to go there.
How long was she there?
Oh, just 1 year, because the contract was for 2 years, but the Cultural Revolution canceled.
Happened, so cancel it.
Yes. So she always told me many things that I need to know. She said, Chinese people work very well before the Cultural Revolution, but they start to become lousier after that, because she also went in the 80s for kind of teaching again Bulgarian for 2 years, and also for even some refreshing studies by herself later on when we're there, me and myself and my sister. So what I'm saying is, my mother has the longest understanding of history of China in the sense of language and how the language have changed in China in the last 60, 70 years. But we always said, we are not interested in politics and we don't care what the Chinese officials say. And I think today it's very hard to do that. That's right. In any country.
That's right, that's true.
even in our discussion, I don't want to go further.
We won't, yeah. Because that is true. It seems like because our communication is so easy nowadays,
yes,
we're finding more countries, if not the world, censoring more people because of this ease of communication we have.
However, I know Americans that are fully naturalized in Japan, being citizens here, they know about China also very well. I mean, I'm not saying I know China very well politically. I know maybe kind of by my own experience and from the experience of my mother and father, because my father also was there before the war, before the Cultural Revolution, just visiting my mother.
Okay.
My father. Yeah. So he has also very interesting and unique experience, but I don't need to explain them now for several reasons. One of them is that shows the underdeveloped side of China at that time, which was 65. People think 65 China was great. No, that was not the case.
It wasn't great in the 80s when you went there. The roads were still dirt.
No, it's not only dirt. It was
I mean,
barely manageable to live there.
I know that. Listen, the one thing I found when I went there, because I started selling equipment, medical equipment there, in the late 80s. And actually we had the opportunity to go as teachers in the 70s, the late 70s, when they finally opened it up to foreigners. I didn't go then, but I went in the 80s. And it was interesting to me. They had the basics. They had a roof over their head. They had clothing. It wasn't new.
Don't forget, they have public toilets. There is no private that time. You know that.
But let me tell you what.
Every community have their own toilet, and the doors will be never closed. So when I was living in the 80s in the dormitory,
it was all public toilet.
No, I was living in the dormitories. The doors for male and female was also the same toilet. When the Chinese people go there, even female, they never close the door. So I need to always carefully watch if it's occupied or not to make sure that I don't disturb them.
Yes.
You understand? This is a cultural.
I understand that. No, I mean, because traveling through the country too, when you got off the buses.
Oh, I have on the bus. I was in the 80s in the bus with my mother.
You went into the weeds.
Yes.
The women would go to the left, the men would go to the right.
Yes.
And everybody do what they have to do and they'd come back.
And also, do you understand what is interesting? If you travel to South China, like Fujian and Guangdong, they eat sweet stuff and everything is on the floor of the bus. Yeah. And we're trying to put it in the back, and we said, and we realized that nobody can do that.
Isn't that interesting?
But it is a cultural effect.
Of course it's culture, because even when I came to Japan...
And the lady from the bus need to clean after every stop, I mean.
That's right. I think that's...
And long-term bus, I mean, not the short one.
I understand. Well, even if we're talking about China and stuff like that, you could talk about any country back in the day. Every country's evolving.
Of course.
Because America, the same thing. I think about that as a little kid. And then look at it now, where our infrastructure is starting to cave in because no one's taking care of it. But it was really beautiful.
No, because you require high maintenance fees.
There's no maintenance, you know, in it. But then you look at Japan, after the war, what it's doing. So every culture has its own thing, and China and stuff. But let's get into this. What was your first job once you finished university?
Oh, I have not such kind of job because I need to go to the military training. Oh, and then went to China. I have no job after graduating university right away.
Wait, you had a deferment, but you still had to go.
Yes, I cannot. You see, I'm sorry, I cannot manage in the way you did. I tried to kind of. I tried to delay. I tried to make medical reasons. My parents tried, but it was not possible.
My goodness! And you couldn't.
I have 6 months of what is it called? Reserve officer training.
Yes.
And then 1.5 years staying in the actual unit. And luckily, I was transferred from one division to artillery, which was kind of much easier because I could have at least city break on the weekend, which was not possible otherwise.
What was your job in the military?
No, I was just cleaning some optical equipment that is necessary for the artillery division.
That's all.
Yeah, I was fine.
For 2 years.
No, I was fine for 1.5 years. I was not fine for the first 6 months of training.
I can imagine.
Because I have 9 duties, and 9 duties during all these 2 years was the one that really damaged me.
What was it called?
Night duties.
Night duties.
You need to stay around the phone and need to answer.
Yes.
You have another guy to exchange every 2 hours, but in reality, one guy slept more, so you need to suffer more.
I understand.
Because of this older and younger soldiers.
So after you got out of the military, what did you do?
I went to China directly, right away.
Again?
Not again. That was immediately after.
So I missed it. Okay, so I missed the part. So from university, you went into the military, or did you do it while you were in the Once you finished university, you went to the military.
Yeah, because of the conscription.
You have to for 2 years. Then from there, you went to China.
Yes.
Okay, with your sister.
Yes, because luckily she was as a kind of undergraduate. I was a graduate student, so we applied different programs. But the first year we in the same place.
I understand.
And after that we stay in different places.
Right.
And but she stayed after me as well, because when I went to University of Toronto, she stayed longer because need to graduate university there.
I understand.
In Peking University is how much, 5 years or 4 years or something like that.
So you went to Toronto. What did you do?
I started my postdoc there. Postdoc in material science.
Right. Right.
And I was very excited because I have British professors being professors in the University of Toronto. And of course, at that time, I don't know so much about the history of Canada and US, but later I learned,
yes,
because I became naturalized Canadian citizen. Okay. And then I leave. And then after Toronto University, I went to Japan.
But let me ask you this. Are you married now?
Yes.
Were you married then?
No.
Okay, so you're single all that time?
Yes.
Okay. So you finished your postdoctorate, and then you did what?
And then invited me for sabbatical research in Tsukuba, Japan.
Okay. Scuba diver.
East. Yes. And I went for 1 year. When I returned back, I quickly was able to find a job in Montreal. And then I started to work continuously for the electronic industries in Canada, in Japan. I also went for 3 years in Florida, US. I mean, work for the US companies. And then I decided after my daughter was born to return back to Japan to offer her education in Japanese.
Wait, your wife's Japanese?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just trying, you're going kind of fast for me. So after you left Toronto, you were invited to Japan.
Yes.
Is that when you met your wife?
No.
Okay.
No.
Let's get to that. So I can put that in perspective.
Yeah. So I returned back to Canada after 1 year.
Okay.
And I was looking for the kind of say job outside of university, outside of academia. Academia I found was difficult because you need to be either professor or you need to be permanently a research assistant. So I don't like that. I applied for many engineering jobs and I got one in Montreal first, and then I moved back to Toronto after 1 year. I was in Canada, in Toronto, when I attended conferences in Japan on my field of ferroelectrics. And during one of these conferences, I presented, and I heard a question from one Japanese asking me about my research. And then I talked in private after the presentation, and I realized that there is a lot of interest in that in Japan.
What was it? Tell us what it is. What was that? Your field of research?
That is at that time was a very hot topic. Not now. At that time was ferroelectric memory.
Okay.
It was a very early field at that time, in the early 2000s. So.
And what is that?
Okay, so this is a material that can switch polarization if you apply external electric field. So that's how, if you apply that, you can make a permanent memory of one state. Even you remove the field, this state remains and is non-volatile. So that's why it was a very hot topic at that time, and Fujitsu did a lot of work in that. I have American friends now that we're working. I was invited to join one large Japanese company, different from Fujitsu, in Kansai, in Kyoto. And then he was in Fujitsu in Tokyo. But what I'm saying is that was the first time I realized that I could live and work in Japan simply because of my field of research or field of engineering.
Wow. And make a good living.
And later they invited me to join that company. At that time I have no idea what Japanese corporation is. I tried to read some book in English, but everything was kind of fractional. The real corporation is very different from what is written in the book. It's in English.
Yeah.
So
you don't get any information, you're saying, from the books?
Not so much. Everything was kind of very superficial and very basic. That was not sufficient to manage, because I was the only, zero language, Japanese language speaking foreigner immersed in a Japanese corporation, which is very traditional, very conservative, and there is no foreigners that I can share any of my experience at that time. Things have changed in the last 10 years. But that time in 2005 range, I have, another foreigner who was married in Japanese and speaking fluent Japanese, and I'm only foreigner coming with difficulties even explaining what I need to the secretaries or the OL, office ladies, members, female staff that need to give paperwork for you. Everything was manual at that time. Everything was paper-based. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when did you get married?
That was at that time. When I went to in prefecture close to Kyoto, which is Shiga prefecture. That was my location. You need to take train every day during the weekend for going to Kyoto, or during the week going to the company. So in one of those occasions I met my wife.
Okay.
Yes. And then after we get married, I got an offer to move to US. So we decided to take this kind of undertaking, and we moved our belongings from Japan to Florida, and then my daughter was born there, and then we are thinking what to do. And
but she has U.S. citizenship then, your daughter?
Of course, because she's born.
Right, of course, yes.
Yeah.
But then did she also get Canadian citizenship since
She
you're
can get
naturalized?
anything from her parents.
Okay, so she can get her Japanese
Bulgarian,
citizenship too.
Canadian, Japanese.
Oh, so you have
US.
Bulgarian, Canadian?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm dual citizenship, which is allowed to be in both Canada and US. Canada and Bulgaria, but not in Japan and US.
Right.
In Japan it is not allowed. In US it's somehow allowed.
It is. It's allowed. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so that's not the point of the citizenship. It's the point of language have effect on mentality.
It does.
So the closest Japanese school is in Miami. Is too far from us, so we cannot drive 5 hours one way. So that's why we decided to move out.
You wanted to make sure she understood Japanese.
Yes, not understand. Get formal education in Japanese.
I understand.
Because going to the Saturday school is not sufficient to get real written Japanese language.
And also cultural. She wouldn't understand the nuances that you can only understand if you go to school.
Correct.
Because they teach, it's interesting. I had my kids in Japanese school, and it was because of a linguist that I decided to make sure they learn Japanese by going to elementary school, because that's where they're taught to be Japanese.
Correct. You're very good. You're very good in linguistics, because
Yes.
I hear from my parents and my sister, but
Yes.
linguistics is very important.
They know. If they know, because they had their daughter, I taught, her name was Claire, I'll never forget her. When she was in elementary school, preschool, she wouldn't speak because her parents spoke 5 languages. But they told me, both parents were linguists, you must be disciplined, not your child. Mondays we speak French.
Wow.
Tuesdays we speak German. Thursday, they did it like that every day. And listen, when she turned 6 years old,
Yeah.
everything, because her mind put it together. But I would say this to her, I say, Claire, do you understand what I'm saying? She'd go, yes. Nihongo wakarimasu ka? She'd go, yes. I'd say, Spanish, Espanol, habla Espanol? And she'd go, she understood, but she couldn't put it together to speak yet.
Correct. Because
so
the
beautiful.
brain wiring, it requires time. And also, please understand, that's a tremendous pressure for the brain.
That's
but
right.
up to 5 languages, brain can take.
And that's what they had,
At that
5 languages.
age.
They had 5 languages, and Claire was phenomenal after she became 6. Poof. And they knew what they were doing, so obviously someone had taught them. Because I don't think, that's why I think this type of thing I'm doing, the podcast, storytelling is so important for us.
It is
Because
important.
no one teaches us how to teach.
Correct. And also, you see, everybody have unique mixtures of
Don't you think?
language, science, arts, and also the country's experience and interactions with other foreigners.
Yes.
I was actually having my significant interactions with the primarily Japanese foreign students in China, because that was the 75-80% of the foreign students at that time were Japanese. Yes.
In China.
Yes. 2 reasons. Low cost. Opportunities for Japanese companies was at that time in the 80s was very booming.
That's right.
And also interest in the traditional Chinese language and culture, which was one of the reasons, for example, for my sister to go to that direction. But to answer your earlier question, my sister went to China because of the pressure from my mother.
She wanted to make sure she went.
No, because she always said, we have too many dictionaries and books in Chinese. I don't want this to be wasted here without you going to continue that field. But my sister was always upset of that because of the pressure changing her direction because of my mother.
What did your sister want to do you think?
She wanted to do probably, what is it called? Visual arts and also maybe literature.
I see.
I mean,
Your father would have been happy with the arts. Yeah.
Book writing or poem
Right,
writings
right.
or something like that.
But that's not what happened.
No. And she was complaining for many years, and I can completely understand.
So what
that.
does she do now? She's
She's a full professor in ancient Chinese linguistics and philosophy, means she's teaching both the origin of the kanji and the philosophy of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi.
Is she married?
No.
She isn't, okay.
No. One of the reasons is she always need to take care of my parents. That was
I see.
one maybe factor.
But she's in Bulgaria now.
Yeah.
And she's teaching that in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
She published many books, but the problem is, I always told her, do not publish in Bulgarian, translate them in English. She never have the time to do that.
I understand. But now it's easier to do. With our technology, it's so easy to do.
True.
She can do it very easily.
I agree with you now completely. The German language translations of
so
DeepL is really powerful.
And it's good. It's accurate now, too.
Yes.
It's not as glitchy as it used to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
10 years ago or 15 years ago was very bad.
Very, very difficult.
I
You might as well write it yourself.
I bought a language translator in software, and it was bad.
All of us tried it once. We wanted to see if it would work, and it just did not. It didn't get the nuances. It could not do it. But now it can, and it puts in the nuance. You can adjust. AI is tremendous nowadays.
True.
I think the biggest issue we have, or the biggest challenge we have, is.
However, you still need to learn it in academic, old-fashioned way before you tap to the AI laziness.
You know what I was about to say, Ivo, is this. Even though our AI is really good, if you don't know how to prompt it, you only get as good an answer as the question you give it. So you have to know how to ask it the right questions. That's the one thing I found that's so important. And the younger people, they have it, but they haven't learned to ask the right questions. They're playing games.
That is the danger of the modern society, of the mobile phones, online games, and also addictive the brain to repetition rather than to analytical thinking or questioning the status quo.
Yes.
Which means we're going to have less challengers in the future.
That's true. But I think academia always does that some way or another. At first it was the fact that if you couldn't read, you couldn't get in. Then we get people up to speed in reading, then they become something else. And we tend to do that as human beings because we like to be on top. We like to stay on top.
But
and that's why countries get rid of the academics, because once they get too strong.
But on the end, let's go back to revisit the entire history in Europe. Europe have very unique education historically, which has now been kind of demolished. I heard that was not in my case, but in university level in Russia, I heard that professor was saying, this is your problem to solve. Go home, open any book and try to solve it. They were giving them real problem that is not in the book. There is no answer there. So you see, that is an example of how you can stimulate, creative thinking. Of course, in Bulgaria it was not exactly like that, but I remember we have lectures from very famous professors that are directly studying from Dirac, quantum physics, and they teach you quantum physics in Sofia University. So you have some kind of inspirational aspect. And of course, not all of the students reach to that level of theoretical physics, let's say, which is always very complex and challenging for all of the students. But what I'm trying to say is that you have impact of the style and history of the professor to your generation of scholars.
That's right. So what are you doing now?
Okay. So what I'm doing now is what exactly I was doing maybe since returning back to Japan, to Toronto, is I'm microelectronics, component manufacturing and product development and technology development. I was doing this for the last 25 years.
What do you find of those things that you're doing, advanced technology and electronics, where do you get your most enjoyment?
In frontier, what is it called? In implementation of challenging new technologies into actual product, because that is very different from academia. Academia, they can publish nice high-impact paper, but it's very difficult to scale that in real product or real mass production. Mass production requires high yield and control cost to make it, accepted by the market. So what I'm enjoying is if new conceptual ideas of new material, new processes, new kind of design, not design, but how to say, device architecture actually been implemented in a real product is very, very exciting, because that is the thing that you need to compete with the top of the top engineers in another maybe. Because don't forget, every field have competition, but in the top level is not more than 6 companies in the same field. In my field is like that. Yes, in the world there's only very few companies, at least less than a dozen that work in the same field. So if you take top of their engineers, maybe 5 to 10 people, multiply by 6, that's the top of the top I need to compete with.
But you know them too.
You know them. You know some of them personally, but most of them you don't. And you never have a forum you can discuss these things because it's competition.
And also, some of it's very private. They want to keep it.
No, it's proprietary.
Proprietary. That's what I mean.
You cannot discuss it in any way publicly. Of course, you can present it in a conference, but you need to present it only, the academic part, and less the technology part. Sometimes it's challenging. But my point is, you know who is there and what they're doing.
That's interesting.
Even, not everything is in the public domain.
Right.
It's very interesting.
I think it is. Before I end the podcast, I like to ask this question. Knowing what you know now and what you've been through throughout life, if you could magically go back in time and meet the younger Ivo, what advice would you give him and what time would you go back to?
Oh, this is a very difficult question. I mean, this is really kind of almost fundamental question in life. Why are you born here? What are you doing in this kind of environment? So I will answer it in the following way. I will return back probably to the younger myself, maybe 10 years old or something like that, and carefully choose the field I like to be, because I like and I enjoy engineering and technology, but there are many other fields that also could be very rewarding in my kind of life experiences, and that is probably philosophy, spirituality, mental training, and this kind of field of complete fulfillment that is beyond physical, beyond science and technology. This is one area that I'm kind of missing to a certain degree because of too much attachment to science and technology that I'm doing on daily basis. So this will be one area that I like to return to myself and go back to get better myself.
So something that you might do something still that you might do as you get older?
Yes, which hopefully I will have a time to do.
Oh.
But I don't want to retire early on because all my duties are for my daughter.
I hear you. Ivo, thank you
so much.
I really appreciate
Thank you so much. I really was very glad to have this long discussion.
Thank you so much. I want to thank all of you for watching this podcast. Make sure you press like and subscribe. And never forget, it's all on loan, so continue to reach for the stars because you're too blessed to be stressed.